Well, hello everyone. Welcome to World at War Comics. My next special guest is Miss Torunn Gronbekk. Torunn, thank you so much for joining me today. We were just kind of talking before. I'm a big fan of Red Sonja, big fan of Conan, and that's how I kind of got introduced to your work. And then I'm seeing all the stuff you're doing on Venom and Carnage, what you've done with Jane Foster and Thor. Like you're pretty busy on the writing side of things. And then I go to your website and these amazing, you have a painting of a young woman with Alfred Hitchcock on her shoulder with a rose on her neck, which is so freaking amazing. So that's why we were just talking before I hit record. When are we going to get like a Red Sonja or a Conan cover by you that's been painted by you?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. That was a
Yeah.
lovely intro. I think you should come with me to all parties from now on and introduce me because I cannot, it turns out, introduce myself. I don't know. I like when people like the Hitchcock thing. That was one of those
Yeah.
things that I did, and then I thought that people would like it, and then no one said anything. But it seems to be a sort of as long as it's interesting for me, I keep doing it. I don't know. Do you ever do that? You have like in jokes with yourself that you just keep go doing years on years?
Yeah, I do keep them to myself because I have been married for 27 years, and my jokes do not fall the way they used to when we first got married. So it becomes more and more annoying, and I can be very annoying. So we have a really good kind of separation through the day, which really keeps our marriage going. But if she had to stay with me all day long, I would kill her by my joke, or she would kill me from my
She would kill
jokes.
you. Yeah,
Yeah,
good,
yeah,
good,
it'd be
good.
the other way around. Yeah.
See, I have like I did this is a quick story and then I'll
Yeah.
try to explain the in joke. Like years ago, I smoke cigars from time to time. I don't smoke, but I do smoke an occasional cigar. And I was buying a torch lighter on Etsy or something, and it was just a plain Zippo lighter. And the woman reached out and she was like, "Hey, we have a special on engraving. Do you want something engraved?" And I was like, yeah, I want Fuck Communism from Preacher. I want Fuck Up Communism in Steve Dillon's hand. And I spent like, 23 minutes scanning and getting like vectorizing it and getting it exactly right so she could just burn that shit right on there. And I was so pleased with myself. And I sent it over. Was sort of delighted by the idea of having a Fuck Communism lighter. And then she answered all my love and enthusiasm with one sentence, which was, "We don't use that word." And I answered communism, and then I never heard back. I never got a lighter. Definitely didn't get the engraving. Anyway, so from then on, anytime anyone's asked me, "So do you want something? Do you want engraved anything?" I just go, "Hey, yeah, but fuck communism," just to see if they'll do it, and they'll do it. So I have so much random stuff like bags and notebooks and pens with like fuck communism on the side. And the joke at this point, like no one gets, like this is only fun for me. And then from time to time, someone would be like, "Well, what's this? Is this a political statement?" I'm like, "No, no, it's barely a statement. It's nothing. It is. I'm not even sure if it's funny anymore, but I keep doing it because I'm delighted. I don't know.
So how many things do you own now that
Oh,
says
there are
fuck communism?
so many things, so
Like
many things. And
shirts, hats, lighters,
the thing is, no,
cups.
not the lighter, which is fascinating. But I did have like I went to like a Coach store or something, and they had like, "Oh, we will personalize the little locket or whatever." And I went, "Oh, can you do fuck communism?" And he was like, sure." And then he had to check how to spell communism. And my friend was with me, and she went, "I'm not sure if it's funny. I don't think it's funny." I'm like, isn't it? I'm pretty sure it is funny." And then we had one of those moments where like, is my life a lie? But I just keep doing it because, again, I think it's funny.
I think the more you do it, the funnier it becomes. Especially like if you walk into a party and half of what you're wearing, whether it's your purse or your lighter or whatever, it's all the same. I think that would be absolutely hilarious. And then I think people would get it.
Well, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Oppenheimer, not the movie, the man. I just want
Uh,
to like say that because the movie sort of like everyone likes Oppenheimer,
yeah,
but the
yeah.
man is a sort of very fascinating guy. And I made a cape at some point which had Oppenheimer is my problematic fave on the back of it. And I had some sort of moments like in airports wearing this, not remembering and then having people being like, "Hey, can we discuss this?" Like Oppenheimer, and like, I no, like I don't. This is for me. This is. I'm sorry that you're involved, that you read this. Please don't talk to me about communism. That's not,
Yeah.
or Oppenheimer, unless you want me to also talk about communism, by the way, because that's sort of the way to Oppenheimer's heart. You have to be a little
Yeah.
communist. Nothing communist, and then you'll get Oppenheimer.
I love it. I love it. All right, Thorin. Can we go back? I would love to figure out, where did your passion for storytelling begin in your life? And on top of that question, was there a person in your life that really opened that door for you to have that passion for storytelling?
I don't know. It's one of those, like, my dad used to tell stories every morning, like especially during the weekends. He would tell us stories about a very specific sort of giant that he made up, and we would get involved in the storytelling and sort of push the story forward. And there's a whole lore connected to this giant now. And then, like, my mother, like, there was always stories, right? And I remember at some point, like at a very young age, it never occurred to me to become like a writer, to make a living out of writing, but I always knew that I wanted to write and sort of tell some sort of stories on some level. I just didn't quite know how to do that. Um, so I don't know. It's sort of, by the time I went, oh, I can write something, I'd spent so much time sort of figuring it out on my own without sort of knowing that was what I was doing. So I don't know. But I don't think I'm, because it started with, I'm a huge sort of computer nerd. That was what, like, I got my first Commodore 64, that very, like, it was a very old one at that point.
Yeah.
So I finally got my hands on a slightly better version, and we sort of managed to trade myself like an okay computer. But I was always sort of like a mascot for people, because I was like 10-year-old being like, hey, I don't know how to spell properly, but please teach me to code. So I always thought that was what I would be doing forever, like design, painting, and sort of just computer, whatever. But at some point, after doing the computer whatever for a while, and like, I made a company and I sold the company, and I was doing sort of consulting in sort of digital spaces and e-commerce and sort of horrible things like that. And I realized, like, I just hate everyone. I hate them all. I hate every like, they're so boring. They're all, their goals are stupid. I don't know. I just felt so soulless in a way. And I, at some point, I had a sort of email. I put an email reminder that sent me like an email every like 14th day going, remember to write. And I got one at a very specific moment, and I was like, oh yeah, that's what I should be doing. So, and then I sat down and wrote, and at by when I was writing, I had that moment of like, seriously, this is the moment. I was writing a story, and I realized what I wanted to do now was have one of those Steve Dillon, huge fan obviously, Steve Dillon silent panels. I just wanted the reaction. I didn't want to write anything. I didn't want to describe the emotion. I just wanted to see it. And I thought, oh, maybe I should do comics instead. And by the end of that night, I had sort of my first comic script figured out.
And what can
Because,
you share a little bit about that comic strip?
well, I mean, you could technically buy it, which is sort of horrifying. So don't, please don't. Whatever you do, do not go
I
out and
gotta
do
I
that.
gotta go at least look at it and see what
No,
it's about.
please don't, because it is sort of like one of those stupid things you do when you're like, oh yeah, I remember, like, comics, this is what comics is to me, and that's what, like, it isn't a very good book necessarily. But it was, but it felt like, oh, this feels right in a way that nothing else sort of did. You know?
Yeah, no, I think that's beautiful. I mean, I think a lot of people get into it. I mean, everybody's first drawing, everyone's first writing, I think would all have the same impression that you just had about your first attempt at it. But it's opening that door, right? And then finding out that, there's a little bit more passion involved in what I just tried to do. So maybe I should spend a little bit more time in this area, and maybe I'll be a little bit happier because I'll be doing something that I actually enjoy, as opposed to doing something that makes a lot more sense to most of the people in the world, but I hate doing it all day long. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I do sincerely think that there is something to just the people around you, because when you work in comics, people are so ridiculously talented and passionate, and it is so fun. And they're so unpretentious in a way that, like, I did. That was another moment. I had an exhibition with my paintings in New York, and I sort of timed it to coincide with New York Comic Con. So I had my exhibition, and it was fine. But look, New York art people, how they're a fucking parody of themselves. Like they're a walking South Park sketch. You're sort of like, are you seeing yourself? Like this is you. I don't know. And I had that moment of waking up the next morning and then going to New York Comic Con and being like, oh, these are my people. I remember like these, I like these people a lot more than the sort of the pretentious. And I do like, I love a bunch of artists, and there are a bunch of, especially the artists, they're great. But within the sort of fine art community, good God, like
Yeah.
it is ridiculous. And
Yeah, yeah.
I find it fascinating when like I appreciate that you enjoy my paintings and everything, but I work with people who are a million times more talented than me, that sort of keep knocking out pages after pages of this stunning artwork, and I feel like, how is this not more sort of recognized as the art it is? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, yeah. You have a painting, and I don't know, is it okay just to pull up your website real quick, just so as
Oh yeah,
people are
sure.
watching this, because you have a painting, and I would love for you to explain maybe your thoughts around your paintings, because so here's the young boy, but this one right here, I don't
Oh,
know if this is like, is this someone special to you, someone you know, or is this your version? I mean, I look at it and I think of an old Nordic like
it's
leader of
Odin.
a tribe. Odin, there you go. That
It's
explains
Odin.
it. Yeah.
You'll see my mother, who is very much the sort of who, like, she is the one who named me Torunn, and
Uh,
all my siblings equally like Norse names. And she saw the painting and she was like, "Well, he wasn't actually blind. He was missing one eye." And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, okay, relax," because I just painted him with a sort of whitish eye, and that wasn't good enough. I don't know, but yeah, it's Odin. It's
yeah.
supposed to be Odin.
It's awesome. I love it. And that's why I said, with you writing Red Sonja, I mean, and I know Dynamite, right, has the rights to Red Sonja. Titan now has the rights to Conan, but they have come together before with Gail Simone and Jim Zub in the past. It would be amazing for you to have a cover after seeing your art, because I do really think that you could do something amazing. And obviously, I mean, Titan and some of the covers that they're doing, I don't know if I have one next. I mean, just this is Joe. Just go. I mean, look at this cover. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. But I mean, that's his style, and you have a very unique style. And I think from a collector standpoint, like, to connect those styles to the person is just incredible, because he could do something that a lot of other artists can't do for Conan. But I love their art equally because that's their style and that's what makes them them. And I think you have a very unique style that I think would be amazing. And you just said that you're already kind of playing around with the Red Sonja. I would love to at least see what that looks like, whether it becomes a cover or not, because that would be badass, I think.
Well, I mean, I am sort of painting one, and we'll see. We'll see. It's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
the
yeah,
thing about the covers, especially. But I mean, all the covers that I would, I'm sort of blessed with the
yeah,
people I work with, and the Sonia covers are just like, they are so amazing.
yeah,
And she's so gorgeous, and it's,
yeah.
I don't know. Uh, and I think oil paint, which is what I do, it tend to well, sometimes it works on a cover, but it tends to sort of read a little less illustrative in a way, like there's
Mm.
something to it. And then I add as much illustrative elements as I can to sort of approach the style that, I don't know. You know how your style at the end of the day is just all the things that annoys you, and that suddenly that's your style. Like it's the same thing with writing and painting. At some point, I realized like all the little things that I can't seem to fix with my paintings. That's sort of my trademark at this point. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think you're quite talented when it comes to the art side of your experience. Obviously, I know you from the comic side, but as I started digging in, and I was actually at my comic shop yesterday, and I was telling them that, hey, Thornn's going to be on my show, and he goes, "Have you ever seen her paintings?" I'm like, "She
Oh, wait.
paints too?" And he goes, "Yeah." So we went to your website. I'm like, "Holy crap!" I mean, like some people paint. Like I paint. I love painting. I grew up, you know, but I don't paint like that. That is freaking amazing. So when we looked at it, we're like, holy crap, man, this is some pretty good stuff.
That makes me so happy. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that I try to do it just because it calms me down in a way that nothing else does. And I listen to books and I sort of get lost, and it's great. And usually the sort of art part is sort of figuring out what to paint and what is supposed to be and everything that comes first, and then the rest is just sort of meditation. And I find if I don't paint, I get a little insufferable. Like it's better for everyone that I just paint a little bit, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
What is easier to get lost in for you, writing a story or painting? Which one helps you kind of divorce yourself from everything around you?
Listen, painting is blissful. Painting is being one with the universe, while writing is like, well, fucking concrete. Like it's just,
Yeah.
it's, I don't know. It's like I like the moment whenever you do like a 20 page issue, you have to sort of figure out what goes on every page. And I always have to have sort of like, oh, it feels right now. Everything is where it's supposed to be. And when it feels right, then it's fun. But that's the
Yeah.
last 3% of the fucking work. Like it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
And like I'm writing Catwoman at the moment, which is a very fun thing for me, and it's not like unlike anything I've ever done before, mostly because it's so realistic. Like we try to keep it sort of like I'm checking sort of Perry schedules and trying to make sure that everything lines up and everything makes sense and all the tech could technically exist, right? Um, and it's so much fucking work. I don't know. It just takes forever, and I hate myself, and I hate it, and then I send it off, and I hate myself some more, and then at some point I'd just be like, "Hey, this is great," and I'll be like,
Yeah.
I read it again, and be like, "Hey, it is sort of great," and
Yeah.
then it's on to the next one. Nothing meditative about it at any point, except possibly when you see the art come in, you're like, "Oh my God."
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
take credit for this fucking thing. This is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's fun.
I mean, it's pretty awesome. That's when Scott Snyder and Joshua Williamson had their YouTube video where they kind of shared the all in and the absolute, and then they talked about the Prime universe that is not going anywhere. We'll still have the regular universe, but we have this other universe that will be tied through Darkseid, and he goes through the whole thing, and then we start going through the names, and Catwoman and Harley Quinn were the only two that didn't have like a solidified name attached to it. And then like 3 days later, I saw your name get attached to Catwoman. I'm like, oh wow. So that's when I reached out to you because I was already reading Red Sonja, and I was like, this will be fun. So you have written like this whole world of gods has kind of been your like Thor, Jane, Red Sonja, and then all of a sudden, like you said, Catwoman seems so different. Although I think Venom and Carnage is kind of in that Catwoman area too, maybe. Although the
I
violence
mean,
and stuff might.
have you
Go ahead,
read
please.
Carnage? Have you read the
Oh yeah,
Carnage book?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
that was a lot of it is a lot of fun, and it's a
yeah.
fascinating thing what we could get away with. And I mean, I loved every panel of that book. And we only had to change like a few things. Like
uh,
we had to dumb a few things down, but I think the clever
yeah,
ones will probably see where we were going. Anyway. But the thing is, like with Carnage, like in the upcoming issues now, we have at some point like Cletus and Carnage sort of
hmm,
uses another person as a sort of meat puppet,
yeah,
like they're sort of like and Jordan, our editor, is like, how does that work though? Like he's not a host, and we're like, "Oh,
yeah,
he's just like we're just keeping him alive through whatever the fuck, the
yeah,
symbiote, whatever
The
that
symbiote,
is.
yeah. It's a
Blah blah
symbiote,
blah.
right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the symbiote is sort of in him, and they sort of eaten everything, but it's just keeping the heart going. Something,
It's like a puppet.
whatever.
It's a puppet now, right?
Yeah, he's a puppet, and he looks a little crooked, and sort of fixes himself from time to time, and then he breaks out. Whatever, that wouldn't work in Catwoman, not in the Catwoman that I'm writing right now. So it is a sort
Yeah.
of like with Carnage. Carnage is probably the easiest thing I've ever written. Like it came to me in a way that I don't think anything has before, which is, I don't know. It's a thing. It's a realization to have when you're sort of like, it's me and Cletus Cassidy. We're one.
Yeah.
Um, but I would say that the Catwoman thing, just because the pacing is different, the feel is different. I think it works. I hope it works. I hope people will be happy.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm sort of delighted with it. And I just saw the inks for the second issue a couple of days ago. And Fabiana has a way of she adds so many sort of tiny little details to every panel, which is it's already a demanding script with a bunch of tiny things that needs to work. And she just, it's so good. Like there's so good pages.
Yeah.
So I can't wait for people to read. Obviously, I
Yeah.
realized when the announcement, um, when it was announced that there's like a whole subsection of Catwoman fans who are mostly interested in Catwoman and Batman.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say anything about the story because
Sure.
I don't
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
what to say to
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
family.
Yeah.
I was just like, I don't know. I
Yeah.
hope
Yeah.
that any non-Batman fucking also will be. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. I mean, you're gonna have fans all over the place, and Batman too, right? Has gone through quite a few changes over the last year and a half with Chip Zdarsky. He's lost his money. He's like been kind of stripped down, and now he's kind of being built back up. And now you coming on Catwoman. So, I mean, I think a lot of people are really interested to see where the story goes moving forward, which is exciting. And I do think that once in a while, having these these are major changes on major titles that are taking place, which normally doesn't happen, right? You obviously you'll have someone come in and maybe a Jason Aaron comes into Action Comic for a little bit and then he goes out. That's very normal. But to have like, I don't know what percent, 60-70% of your titles all change writers, like that doesn't happen in comics very often. So on one side, I think you have a lot of people nervous because maybe they were enjoying what was happening and now like how much is it going to change? But I find it very exciting to see like new, fresh ideas coming in and see what their take is going to be on those characters. Were you kind of nervous for that same kind of a reason coming into Catwoman, or do you think of it in that kind of a way?
Well, I wasn't nervous at all, really, just because I was talking to Ariana, who is the editor, and we had such a, like, just felt like she was on board. I was like, we knew what we were doing. And then felt a little more nervous over the past sort of month because we know what we're doing and it's a very specific direction. And well, like, as a writer, you always write within whatever framework the publisher gives you, right? So usually it'll be something like when I took over Carnage, he was sort of flirting with godliness, and that's sort of where, and then it's my job to sort of tweak it to something that I find interesting somehow, right? So there will always be some sort of framework from the publisher. Very seldom will they just do whatever you want. That's
Yeah,
never basically never happens unless
yeah,
you are Jason Aaron or someone. Um, but I mean, like even then, it's going to be
yeah,
like sometimes
sure,
like if you're Jason Aaron, then you're doing Punisher, then you might have to do some, I don't know, they might have to approve some things.
yeah,
But within the sort of the context that I was given, it felt so good, like the
good,
Catwoman book, and it still feels great. It's a
yeah,
nightmare to write just because it's so specific, and I keep being like, oh, it's going to be done tomorrow, and then 4 days later, it's just like, I I I've been working all the time. I swear, I haven't done anything else. I haven't showered. I haven't checked the mail. Like this is all I'm doing. It's still not done just because I'm still trying to figure out how long it would take to get from. I'm not going to spoil anything. I'm
yeah,
just
yeah,
saying,
yeah,
like it's just intense amount of detail. But it has been a very interesting and sort of a joyful thing to do as well. I just want to point that out. Just like
Yeah.
writers always complain about their job, but it is the best job in the world. Like it is great. And by
Yeah.
the end of the week, you've learned a bunch of things that you didn't know when you research a bunch of things, and like it's the best job in the world. It's just painful to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Well, you brought up a really good point because whenever you're working for a publisher, specifically Marvel or DC, right? There's going to be you have canon, right? And not always does canon have to be stuck to, but you have editors that are trying to ensure that things are jiving with canon. It's also jiving with other maybe titles that are connected somehow, like a Batman and a Catwoman. What is the title that you are working on now or have worked on where you feel like you have the most creative freedom to do whatever your heart desires with that character?
Well, I mean, like Red Sonja has been sort of they
Yeah.
sort of went do whatever. Like
Yeah.
I think what Joe said was like big and back to basic,
Yeah.
just which is what I wanted to hear. I didn't want to do like Red Sonja in space or like
Yeah.
whatever. Like
Yeah.
I just want to do like the Red Sonja stories that I used to read and I
Yeah.
used to pretend and like I have swords and forests and like a very Norwegian upbringing. So that was very much what I did when I was a
Yeah.
kid. That's what I wanted to write. But uh, other than there are some sort of like rights issues with different parts
Yeah.
of that universe. So we're sort of like Ymir's daughter
Yeah.
has a
Yeah.
name in the lore, can be used that I don't know.
Yeah.
We're a
Yeah.
little unsure, so we're just gonna
Yeah.
she's just a woman in our
Yeah, you
story.
can
I
kind of
don't
make
know.
reference. You can make reference, but you can't use the name and that type of.
Yeah.
Because right, it's really weird, right? You have Heroic Signatures that I think owns the rights to Conan, but then Marvel, right? I'm not sure if they own the rights to Red Sonja because it was created like Robert E. Howard had a Red Sonja, but she was completely different. She wasn't part of the Hyborian Age, and then Roy Thomas brought her into the Hyborian Age. And that's I have the issue right here. Here's 23, the first appearance of
Oh, that's
her.
amazing.
Yeah, because I have a very big collection of Conan. So this is the very first time she appeared. But 24 is where you really get the Song of Red Sonja, which is her very first kind of story that was surrounding Red Sonja. And this is Roy Thomas taking a Robert E. Howard character that had nothing to do with the Hyborian Age, but he loved the story around her. He loved the power that she represented and felt that she could be pretty badass if she was brought into the Hyborian Age. Thus, we got the Red Sonja that we have today. But then over time, you have, who knows, Robert E. Howard, you know, takes his own life in the, I think, 1932, 33. And then the family gets the rights, and then things get split off. And then all of a sudden, now we're here, Dynamite owns the rights to Red Sonja. Or at least they're paying for the rights to it. And then Heroic Signature. It's all over the place, right? And I hope one day they're brought together so we could get some more stories where Red Sonja and Conan come together because they are a force when they're together.
Yeah, and I think that people would really enjoy it. I think it's time
Yeah.
for another Conan and Red Sonja thing, but I don't know. Like it is, I think the only I know that Kulan Goth is still in the Marvel universe and in the Dynamite universe. But
Yeah.
other than that, I'm not sort of like it is sort of one of those we just have to check along the way and sort of
Yeah.
figure it out. But Dynamite has always been sort of like, oh, we'll find a way. Whatever you
Yeah.
want to do, we'll find a way. And I don't think I've gotten a single note on anything. I think the only thing was in the first like the zero issue.
Yeah.
And I joked about this, like the one thing that editors keep telling me is to stop killing children. And Joe's like, oh, I'll never tell you to kill as many
Yeah.
kids as you want. And then I had original. I don't even
I think
remember what maybe.
I think in issue one, right, the
Yeah,
sacrifice.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to be in the series issue. He's like,
Yeah.
hey, I don't think we can do it in the free comic book issue.
Yeah.
And I cursed like a fucking sailor and he was like, can we use tits in free comic book day? I don't think we can use. And I was like, what the fuck are we supposed to say? And he's like, bosoms. So
which is a perfect word for the Hyborian age, right?
It's better. It's better.
Yeah.
And I take the credit. Oh, it's great. But Joe has been amazing. Or like
Yeah.
it's and Walter is sort of like he's a force in itself. Like like the scripts, I write very full scripts. But I realized with time that Walter doesn't need anything. I think the last issue I sent him, there's a fight scenes that I sort of tell him what I think, and then I go, do whatever you want, just end it with the flying head coming towards us. Just as long as the last page we have his head flying towards us, then we're fine. And then he is like, yeah, that's what I got into comics for. Let's go. Like it's great.
I love
Uh,
it. I love it.
yeah, I do too. Like it's so much fun, and it's also one of those. Like I don't feel like I have to teach anyone anything in Red Sonja. Like it's one of those. It's a sort of it's respite from the fucking world. Just sitting down
Yeah.
and writing Red Sonja.
I love it. I was at San Diego Comic Con and I was able to go a couple hours. I had back surgery, so I wasn't able to walk the
Oh,
whole time. But the reason why I was there is for two. One, I'm a big fan of Frank Frazetta. And so that's another reason when I looked at your art, I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. So I went to the Frazetta panel, and Sarah Frazetta, who I've had on the show, was there. And I love talking to her because of the history around Frank Frazetta and really how that took Conan the Barbarian through the Lancer books, and really it exploded worldwide. It was popular in like Pulp Fiction in the US, but very small. And then once Frazetta's art was on there, it just exploded. And that's really where we got Conan. And then obviously Marvel brought it in the 60s with Roy Thomas. And now here we are today. So there. And then Titan had a panel with Jim Zub and everybody else, which I thought was so fun and so awesome. So I'm hoping, Torunn, that you and Jim could get together and do what Gail and Jim did a few years ago. Just give us like a 4-part series where Red Sonja, I mean, they're in the same, like, they're in the Hyborian age. They got to come together. There's got to be a reason why they need each other. And I think that would be so much fun.
we can find a reason. That's not the problem. It's
Yeah.
well, I'll check with Dynamite and see. But I mean, I don't know. That's
They've done it
one of the
before.
things. I mean, as long as it's not too much fucking paperwork or something, I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it is fascinating with Frazetta, because I did one Death Dealer issue, like a one single issue, like a couple of years ago. And the fascinating thing is, like, especially in Norway, people don't really know like Marvel in Norway. They might know the movies, and every time, like, if people ask me what I do and I try to explain it, they're like, so do you know Taika Waititi? And I'm like, no, really not. That's not the job. I don't know. And then it's always slightly confusing. But the fascinating thing with Frazetta and Red Sonja are both like, oh, Red Sonja, and Frazetta issue. I keep sort of signing those things in Norway because people are sort of like, that's a huge deal. I'm like,
Yeah.
I also wrote Thor for a while. Like, is that something? We heard of Venom? It sells like hotcakes. Like, is that a thing? No, that's not a thing.
No.
Give me Death Dealer, and it's great.
Yeah. No, Death Dealer is incredible. The stories that a lot of writers have put, because Frank Frazetta created all these characters. You have Sea Witch. We don't know much about Sea Witch, right? Because there's really never been stories, but he had all these amazing characters that he created through his art. So it must be pretty fun to be able to take just a picture and then create a story around that.
Oh,
I know
God.
others have written Death Dealer. There's been series and whatnot, but I mean, that's got to be awesome. Was that through Opus at the time? Was that the publisher? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they still own the rights, if I'm not mistaken, to Death
That's
Dealer. But yeah, that's
It's
awesome.
one of those things that I like. It is fascinating. The more you write and the more you do for the industry, the less you pay attention to the actual industry. So I keep like every time like something happened at San Diego, and I'm very happy or sad for everyone. I don't know what went on. I was writing. I don't know. And people keep asking me like, when are you going to go to San Diego? And it's the only month, like July is the only time it's nice to be in Norway where I live. So I don't want to leave. Like, can't there be a thing in February? Why can't you make a con in Florida in February? Like, that would be something.
Yeah. Well, have you done WonderCon before? Because that's earlier in the year, and that's
they should
not
invite
as
me.
big. Yeah.
I would go anywhere in February.
Yeah.
That's the trick. It's
Yeah.
just getting me out of the country in
Yeah.
January, February when it's at its darkest here because I go a
Yeah.
little crazy, I gotta tell you.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
mean it is a functioning country though, so that's something.
That's nice. Yeah, that's good to have a functioning country. That's important. Are you
Yeah.
north or south of Norway?
I'm sort of midish. It's
Oh,
not
in the
like
middle. Okay,
this,
yeah.
yeah, not the staggeringly beautiful part, which is the north or any sort of
Yeah.
coastliney. That is with the staggering beauty comes sort of staggering weather too.
Yeah.
So I'm in a sort of like the sensible part, like it's fine, it's
Yeah.
great. I don't know, it functions, and I have a cabin about like 2 hours drive from here, just right over in the Swedish, like right over to the border to Sweden. So
Mhm.
every time, like if I post like moose and foxes and shit, that's from the cabin in the
Uh,
forest in Sweden. But that's also sort of like the boring, foresty, sensible part. And so
is
it
that,
gets
oh, go ahead, please.
no, it's just it gets cold and it gets dark, but it doesn't get sort of like we get some sort of almost sunlight in the middle of the day,
Mhm.
while up north you get no sunlight, or
Yeah. Yeah.
right now all sunlight.
Yeah.
There's no nights.
Yeah, I lived in Alaska right out of high school. I have an uncle there, and I got in a lot of trouble in school. So my dad sent me to live with his brother. And so I was there in the
To
summer,
straighten
24
you
hours of
out,
sunlight. Yeah,
s-
did not
that's
work, by the way,
brutal.
Thorn. It did not work because there's nothing to do in Alaska.
No,
So
you get in
and
trouble.
I got so you end up going into the forest, you bring cans and you bring a gun and you shoot bottles, or you go to a bar, or up there they have this nudie bar and it's a chain called Bushes. And
Oh,
they're
that's so good.
it's so amazing. And you only had to be 18 at the time to go. And as long as you bought a drink at that time, a Coke, because I wasn't 21, as long as you had up to a half of a glass, you could stay. And they would fly women in from like Seattle and Portland as the dancers and stuff. So that's all I did. And then I got in fights, and then I shot bottles, and I got drunk, and I got high. And then my uncle, who had three young kids, goes, "I can't handle it anymore." So it only lasted a year, and he sent me back. But I tell you that because I experienced 24 hours of sunlight and like 20 hours of darkness, where you only get like a little bit of sunlight during the day during the winter. So I loved it though. I love the outdoors, but
The bushes. I want to go to Alaska just to go to bushes now. I hope it's still a thing.
I think it
Uh,
is. It was a chain. A lot of truck drivers, right? Because they would be making through Canada, up through Anchorage and Fairbanks, and yeah, it was
Perfect.
funny. Yeah, yeah,
See,
yeah,
that's all I want to do. The thing is, like, I have a very romantic view of America, as I
yeah,
suppose a lot of people do. I
yeah,
love it there. I love coming to visit. And sometimes your Americanness is sort of like, oh, that's too much of it. Like, we have to stop being, mm,
pull back a little bit,
please,
right?
just calm down a tiny bit now. But
Yeah,
I just enjoy that all of those things are like every time you see a movie and you think like, no,
yeah,
those places doesn't exist. They're like, no, they're right there.
they do.
That's
Yeah,
a place with like one McDonald's and like a mini mall, whatever the fuck that is, and then there's just nothing. I did one of those excellent like Amtrak,
oh
like
yeah,
4 or 5 days through your country. I loved it.
yeah,
And at some point, uh, there was like 9 hours of nothing. Like there's nothing, and there was one guy in his boxer shorts in a house right next to the train track, and he was just giving us the finger, screaming at the train. And then it was 9 hours of nothing, and I was like, "What? Could you move your fucking cabin? Just if you
yeah.
hate the trade that much, like, there's nothing out here.
You can
You
literally
can
move anywhere.
figure it out. No one's gonna notice if you just back off. Like it's so good. I love it so
That's
much.
That's hilarious, man. I would have loved to see that too. Yeah, I mean, U.S. is so big, and I don't think people realize how large the country is. We have friends in England, and I live near Palm Springs, and I work in San Diego, and it's about a 2 hour drive for me there, and about a 2.5 hour drive back. And people are like, but
Do,
in
do
England,
you
you could
do that
go.
every day?
No, about 2 times a week, 3 times a week. I work from the house most of the time. we own a brokerage company, so we represent food brands in the grocery industry, and our headquarters is in San Diego. So I only go there if we have meetings with brands or something like that. So I hope I like to work from home most of the time, and most of the time I do. But I at times in the past where I worked for another company, I did every single day. And my friends from England are like, dude, that's nuts
That
because
is nuts.
they could go from the ocean right from east to west in 2 hours and cross their entire country. And all I'm doing is going to San Diego. And so they like the vastness of our country from South Texas to Oklahoma, it takes you 12 hours to drive.
Yeah.
Right. And that's
Yeah.
one state. It's just gigantic. And so you could
And
be,
people,
oh, go ahead. Yeah.
no, it fascinates me how people just keep moving around. Like it would be if I just moved to Spain for a little while,
Yeah. Yeah.
which would be insane to me. But like when people just, oh, we just tried another state for a bit. Like
Yeah.
I took 2 years in Ohio. Oh, first of all, why?
Yeah.
And like so what? Like family, what did you do? It's like, oh, it's all
Yeah.
America.
Yeah.
I find it completely fascinating, but I will say that spending 2 hours in a car is madness for
Yeah.
going to work. Like that is like 4 hours a day.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. But I mean, that's just what you have to do sometimes, to work because San Diego is a pretty big, I think it's about 3.5 million people. And there's a lot
Jesus.
of, a lot of business down there because it's a border city. And the brands that we represent, our kind of niche in our business is mainly Mexican brands and helping them get established in the US because we have a huge Hispanic population and about 60% of the Hispanic population are of Mexican descent. And so they want the foods that they grew up on, but
True.
those brands don't know how to get into the US. And so we're there to help them along the way with trademark law, setting up an LLC, and then getting them meetings with the grocery chains, and then trying to get those products there so that the Hispanic population that grew up on those brands, right, can feel a little bit of that home that they probably miss. And within my wife's Mexican, so the Mexican culture, like food and family, are like huge. Whereas the American, like I have cousins that I haven't seen in 30 years and I never even think about it. We'll be in San Diego and she'll have a cousin that she hasn't seen in 2 months and they're like hugging like they haven't seen each other in 50 years. It's just
Love it.
culturally, it's so differently, right? Like us Americans, especially Caucasian Americans, like I have my wife and I have my kids, and that's the extent of
Yeah.
everything. Her, it's every week. We're celebrating when my child first walked. We're celebrating their first poopy diaper. We're celebrating, and I got like 50 Mexicans at my house drinking beer to celebrate. I'm like, what the hell is
Good.
going on? But that's just the culture, right? So it's fun. It's awesome, and it's
That
pretty
sounds
cool.
amazing. I
It
mean,
is, yeah,
it is. I mean, I'm Norwegian. We don't talk to each other at the best of times. Like
yeah,
we're so like we're at the complete opposite side of the scale. But we do look at it and go, "Oh, it sounds so lovely. It would be nice to see people from time to time." I think maybe I don't know. Never tried it. I think it could
yeah,
possibly be cool. As long as it's not with my family though, because they are a
yeah,
nightmare. So if I can
yeah.
get another family, that would I don't know. But it's that sounds lovely. I like that, and I will say that because we in Norway for reasons unknown we eat a lot of what we call like tacos. Like there's a lot of
Mhm.
Mexican food which has nothing to do with Mexican food. But we do try.
Yeah,
But it occurred to me when I went to San Francisco, and I have some friends who know sort of where to eat, and they brought me to one of those little places where that there's no front door,
yeah,
but the food is amazing.
yeah,
And I realized like there like there's something in the like the vegetables are just better. And I think it's just because we don't get any sun. So
yeah.
even if we do like the best we can with what we have, it's not going to be as tasteful.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would just I'll come and have dinner at your place if that's okay.
Please,
Like that
yeah.
sounds nice.
You could have some really good Mexican food, and you'd be surprised what you could do. Like the different, so the Mexican food, and there's all kinds of comedians that always kind of make fun of this, right? Because it's really beans, rice, and a tortilla. But you could have a flauta, which is a tortilla, a flour tortilla with a little bit of meat, deep fried. You could have a taco, which is a tortilla with meat, with a little bit of beans. Like they have all these different dishes with the same ingredients. They all taste different
Yeah,
and
but
they're all
yeah, that's
amazing. It's incredible. Yeah. I live on a Mexican diet, to be quite honest. I mean,
So
it's
I
probably
would
why
be
I look
fucking
the way I would.
happy.
Yeah, I am
Yeah,
happy.
I once had like just a salsa of some kind where I'm like
Yeah,
this fucking magic stuff. Like what's
yeah.
in it? It's like it's tomatoes. Have you heard of those? Like I don't know. And I had one of those like how why can't we do this
Yeah,
here? But we can't.
yeah,
But I
yeah,
mean it is but we will serve you like if you come over here, I'll make you reindeer and it's gonna be tasteful. We
yeah,
do like fatty and salty very well.
yeah.
That's what we know how to do because
I
every
love it.
dish we have here is just based around getting through the winter,
Yeah,
somehow getting the food through the winter. So it's a lot of salt, a lot of
yeah,
fat. That's what we do.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you have to. And Alaska is somewhat similar, especially when you get up like past Fairbanks. They call them the bush people, right? And I worked at a grocery store, not related to Bush's, the chain. This is the people that live in the bush. And I just want to make sure that's clear. But they live in cabins in the middle of nowhere, and they have these little biplanes that land on water. And so they come into Anchorage and they do their shopping, and they'll buy like 5 months worth of food. And I worked at a grocery chain up there called Cars, and that's what we would do. We would load up their vehicle, and then they would drive it to their plane, load up their plane, and then fly in the middle of nowhere, and they would live
Nice.
there. And so they live off of moose, they live off of deer, they live off of all this wild animals because they're hunting throughout the winter on snowmobiles. Because if you run out of meat, it's very expensive, right, for fuel and everything to make that trip. So you better buy the right amount, and they're all like the healthiest people you'll ever
Oh
see
yeah.
because right, they make everything fresh. There's no Taco Bell or McDonald's around. And yeah, I kind of jealous a little bit sometimes when they would come in because they just seem happier. They don't have the stress of being in a big city and having to drive 2 hours to your job. And I don't know, it's a different way
Well,
of life that I would love.
the thing is
At
like
least try.
it is very much like that in Sweden, where like in the forest in Sweden where I have my cabin, and people are so nice. They're fucking crazy, but they are
Yeah,
nice, and they will like give you mushrooms and
yeah,
bring you food, and it is a lovely community of absolutely batshit insane people, and I love them. But again, crazy. Uh, and I had a moment where I was sort of because I go there and I bring enough food to not leave the cabin for like a couple of weeks, and I'm just there alone writing, and there will people sort of stop by from time to time. And I realized at some point I was writing Punisher, and with this Punisher, this was Jason's Punisher, and I was sort of doing War Journal, but sort of using his Punisher. We weren't supposed to use guns, so I was trying to figure out sort of fun ways to kill people that didn't involve guns or really knives or like fun things, you know?
yeah,
And I was chopping wood one day, and one of the people came by, and we had a conversation. Like one of the neighbors came by, and I was trying to explain my problem for the day, which was like, how do you kill people? And we had sort of brainstorming thing, and then they left, and I realized like I'm one of the crazy people, which is fucking it. Like when I'm there, I'm just like I fall into this community of idiots with plum. Like it's just great. And so at some point during the pandemic, I figured like if everything goes to hell, if I can get like a couple of sheep and some chickens, I will probably be pretty happy up there. Like
yeah,
I think it'll be fine.
yeah,
Um, but let's not let's keep it theoretical. Let's
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Let's try not to give it a just try not to end the world immediately. I know
Yeah, yeah.
we're rushing into something. We're just
Yeah, yeah. Let's
I
slow
don't
down
know.
just a bit. Yeah,
A
slow down.
tiny bit. I don't know. Just get our
Oh,
kids through it somehow.
exactly.
Yeah.
Somehow. Yeah, I agree with
Hmm.
you. I agree with you. Well, Thorn, when can we expect issue 1 of Catwoman? And then I have one more question of a new title, not a new title, but a title that you're part of with Garth Ennis called
Oh yeah.
Battle Action.
Yes,
So I
let's
think
talk about
that's in
battle action.
August. Yeah, that's in August, if I'm not mistaken. But when is Catwoman? Is that in October?
October.
Yeah. Okay.
At some point. Like I
Yeah.
wish I
Yeah.
remember. If I know, I have forgotten. But it's at some point in
Yeah.
October, and I do hope like it is one of those. Please check it out.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be good both for all the new readers. I really do. But yeah, battle action. It is one of those like it's a very British thing.
Yeah.
They had two different anthologies, like in the 70s and 80s. And I don't remember exactly when Battle and then Action, and then when they sort of came together to be Battle Action, but at some point that happened. So Battle Action is a sort of collection of old strips that Garth loves, like he loves them. And he started writing them again and being like, hey, we should get this going. And there is a character in there. There's a strip called Johnny Red, who is a British pilot who finds himself working with the Soviets during the Second World War. And in Johnny Red, there is a female pilot called Nina Petrova. And he's done, like Garth has done some quite interesting Nina Petrova stories. And he's obviously done Night Witches in both in like war stories. That was it called. Like it's just one of those. Like Battlefield, I think.
Yeah.
Battlefield, he did Night Witches, and he's done like his own sort of Night Witches graphic novel too. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
He's written a bunch of Night Witches. And Nina Petrova is probably his introduction to the Night Witches, because she is based on the Night Witches, who were the sort of the female bomber regiment that the Soviets had, which is a real thing, where they flew their PO2s, which was sort of like horribly slow, noisy planes that like shouldn't have been flown during the Second World War, but it was what they got.
Yeah.
So at some point they figured out that the only way they could sort of hurt the Germans was to sort of glide, like turn the engine off, glide over, and drop their load of like 400 kilos of bombs or something. So it's nothing. Like it's just like it's a tiny little annoyance. That's what it is. You might get a couple of people, but it's not like a huge problem. And then they would restart their engine and go back and do it all over again. And they would fly 12 to 16 times a night, which is sort of staggering. And I always loved the Night Witches. I found them. I'm a huge sort of aircraft geek.
I saw one of your paintings, which was pretty awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, that is, we're trying to build a Spitfire, and that is the this is a whole thing. Like I'm in the Norwegian Spitfire Foundation. I don't know. So I paint that because that is the pilot who's it's not the Spitfire, but the Spitfire we are trying to make. He flew at some point.
Wow.
Whatever. Yeah. But I'm a huge, like, specifically warbirds, like specifically from like the first, but mostly the Second World War. And then once the sort of the jets come into play, I lose interest really fast. Like I need it to be something spectacular to be interested. But anyway, so Garth knows this, and at some point he went, "Hey, I want you to take over Nina," which was a sort of amazing thing to me, just because it's everything I care about deeply. I love battle action. I used to get Don't Tell Rebellion, obviously, but I used to find like single issues here and there, because I'm in Norway, obviously we didn't get it weekly, but there was one tired sort of like someone else in my town read it and gave it to the used bookstore guy, and then I would buy it, and then I would find PDFs of all the missing pieces in between. Sorry about that. So I've sort of almost read everything, and I was so excited to be able to do the first Nina Petrova story, which we did last year, and we're doing another series now. And I think it's 10 issues this time. So the one in August, that's not me, but it is Garth Ennis and Brian K. Vaughan, because Garth made Brian do one as well. So there's a bunch of sort of great war stories with a sort of 70s, 80s sort of flair over them.
Love it.
And it's so much fun. Like if you're into any sort of war stories, you should definitely pick up Battle Action.
Yeah. I mean, I love that whole era of World War II specifically. Both my grandfathers fought, one in Japan, one in North Africa, and then obviously Europe campaign. He actually was in Normandy. So, and I have, like, in our hallway, I've been given their flags and all of their medals. And that whole era and the type of people that grew up during that era were just a different type of people, right? Like a lot of people think people have gotten a lot softer, and I think they have, right? Because life has become, I think, a little bit easier. But there still are people like that, and I've met them. But that era of World War II, no matter where you grew up around the world, you just grew up differently. And I just there's such an appreciation for that era and how everyone came together during that. I'm just so much about it. I love. And like you, the war planes and the technology, even though we look at it now, I live next to it's called March Air Force Base, and it's over the years become very, very small. But they have a plane museum, and it's very close to where I live, and they have all kinds of World War II era planes that you could walk into and look at.
Awesome.
You would love it if you ever come to Southern California. Like WonderCon is in Anaheim. From Anaheim to there, it's probably an hour and 15 minutes. And because you love planes, and they have all the uniforms and they have the history of World War II, a little bit of Vietnam as well, and some of the helicopters during that time frame, but you would have a blast.
I would have a blast. I was going to say I love Vietnam, but that sounds horrible. I'm very
Yeah. I know what
interested.
you mean. Yeah.
I did Baltimore Comic Con last year, and because there were a bunch of nice people, and Baltimore turns out to be a lovely place. But
Yeah.
also because I could go to Chicago and go to the Stephen Hazy, whatever. Like there's a huge like center with everything.
Yeah.
And I got to spend like sort of the day just brought my laptop. There was no one there. I just walked around looking at all the planes. Then I wrote a little bit and I went back down. It was probably the best day of my life. Like it was
Yeah.
absolutely amazing. I don't see
Yeah.
how anyone out there gets anything done, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's great.
Yeah. This is
But
much smaller, but it's pretty cool though, still. Yeah.
it is very fun to sort of be able to combine the comic writing with the sort of something that I'm
Yeah.
actually quite passionate about. And war stories are hard to sort of get through, and it's hard on the artist. There are only just sort of a handful of people that can deal with like especially when it comes to planes, like
Yeah.
and especially when it comes to Garth, because he will be very particular about like, oh, that hurricane doesn't look quite right. You should redo it. I don't know. I have one of the pages up here. Like,
Yeah.
are we on camera?
Yeah.
Like up there. That's
Oh,
from Sonia
wow.
Red, and it's a Keith Burns page, and I have the original double spread, and then I have the replacement hurricane that they had
Uh,
to put on there because Garth was like, we need to see the roundels, which I would have killed him. But I mean, it is what it is. But it is a very sort of specific kind of person who can deal with drawing war stories. But it's just because everything needs to be particular and everything needs to be
yeah.
somewhat right. And they're like, speaking of research, like it's a just doing the paintings I do, I'm getting stuck into like, so what were the parachutes like? What color were the
Mm,
parachutes for the Norwegians in 1941? Like it's a whole
yeah.
thing. But battle action is sort of one of the like they get it right. So
Yeah.
just get battle action from August.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Garth Ennis is extremely popular and a legend. And then when I saw that your name was on that, I'm like, holy crap, man, this is going to be freaking awesome. And now knowing the passion that you have for that era, I'll definitely be part of that. I think that's going to be absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible, Thorn.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of other really amazing people
Yeah.
working on it too. So it's one of those because Garth knows
Yeah.
everyone, so he will like Brian was one of those. This is me speaking out of my ass, but I can only imagine him being like freaking out writing something because he knows that Garth's gonna see it and be like, "Hey."
Yeah.
And I just love the thought of Brian K1 having a meltdown somewhere in LA. He's sitting there being like, "Oh, I need to get this right." So
Freaking out.
yeah,
Yeah.
and he did, just so you know. Like it's
Yeah,
great.
yeah, yeah. All right. So last question. Um, Sisters of Battle. Did you grow up a big Warhammer fan? Like, how did that come about? Or is that just one of those titles that you were given and you just ran with it? Like, Warhammer has some of the craziest fans I've ever met. And I
Oh,
follow a bunch of them on Instagram, and they're amazing. The patience that they have with the painting and how serious they take the canon. And I mean, you see what's happening with Henry Cavill, and they're trying to make changes in canon, and people are just losing their freaking minds. And I didn't grow up with Warhammer. I have a bunch of Warhammer figures from McFarlane because I just think they look badass.
Oh, they're
But
so
like
cool.
I've never like been super involved in Warhammer, but I love the comics. So I have all the comic series because I think it is really cool. And I've watched a lot of the movies. But man, and especially in England and throughout that Nordic region, Warhammer is not a joke that you want to mess around with, I don't think.
God, no. It was interesting because I love Warhammer, and I played
Uh,
Warhammer from like I was 17, and I've had an army. I had a sister's army when they sort of asked me, which was, I'm not sure if they know. I think Kieran had checked at some point because he is obsessively interested in Warhammer. And I like to paint the figures. I painted a bunch of armies, and I do play it from time to time, but I'm old at this point. Like, it's like, when do we ever do anything? Like, I haven't left the house in 3 months. I don't know. But I used to be hugely into like the fantasy side of Warhammer, and then at some point 40K was like, I think this is kind of cooler. Like, um it's just absolute madness. And I had like some of the factions that I found more interesting. And then the sisters I knew very well, but I was sort of like, oh, am I really going to do like the one? I don't know. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Let's do it. Okay.
yeah.
I get that I'm the woman. It's fine. Having said that, like it felt like very much my thing, and we had Games Workshop. Because when you do, like, when you paint and everything, you get into the lore and you think you know everything, of course. But at some
Yeah.
point, like, they change everything all the time, and the things that you learned by playing with someone 10 years ago isn't necessarily correct anymore. So we had Games Workshop sort of guiding us through how they were thinking right now, and sort of making sure that we got everything right. But that is like, when that was announced, it is one of the few times that I've ever been like, oh, I need to make sure that my address is not out there, because
Yeah.
I always had the sort of like, I'm in Norway, I'm okay. Like, it's
Yeah.
no one's gonna, like, who's gonna bother me here? But the moment the Warhammer thing was announced, I got a few texts from people like that found my number somewhere in Norwegian, going like, "Let's hope you're a true fan." Dot dot dot, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay,
You better get this shit right,
yep,
Thorn.
yep, or we're gonna find you. Like, it's just such a weird thing.
Yeah.
I had one guy at some point like text. He took found my house on Google Maps.
No.
Just took a screenshot and be like, yeah, so okay, so you know where I live. Cool, cool. I don't know what to do with that.
That's weird
So
though.
yeah, it's a
That's
little
weird.
something. So
Yeah.
I felt the sort of I was very nervous that they wouldn't enjoy it. But then again, I also know that I'm not gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna use Warhammer to teach, but like, I'm just having fun
Yeah.
with the thing. I'm just trying to be as violent as Marvel will let me. I was just trying to
Yeah.
be, and it turns out we were working with we were working with Slanesh, who is one of the, it's sort of the god of fucking and debauchery, and we couldn't do anything, which was sort of, and I sort of hoped that Marvel had gotten the memo that that was sort of the thing. So I
Yeah.
had to tone that part down quite a bit, but people seem to enjoy it either way.
Yeah.
And had
Yeah.
it been up to me, there would have been more something.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was as something as we could make it. Just
Yeah. Yeah.
but I don't know. But that was one of those. I'm happy people enjoyed it, because
Yeah.
I don't think that would have been fun if they decided that I was a fake fan or whatever. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I'm very careful whenever I talk about 40K. I have the collection of the action figures so they just look amazing, but that is not my world. And I make sure that's very clear because people will, like, in the DMs and Instagram, just eat you alive, or they'll do a video about you. Like, this idiot is trying to talk about Warhammer, and it's just like,
Yep.
I like the characters. That's all. I'm just an action figure
Yep.
collector. That's
But it's
all.
so fascinating when you go like, I just like it. Is that
Yeah.
done
Is that
enough? No,
okay?
it's not
Nope.
enough. But in my
Yeah.
case, I was like, I've been doing this for like, I've been playing Warhammer for 20 years. Surely that must be enough,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's surely. I mean, I'm trying so hard to get everything right, and I don't know. It was fun,
I
but I
think it
did
worked out.
enjoy it. I
Yeah.
absolutely loved every moment of that series. And that is one of those things that people will like. They still bring the issues to cons and have them signed and everything. So it feels like it's a more like it's living longer than a lot of the Marvel series that seems to sort of fiddle out.
Yeah.
So that's something, and I like that you have something there.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Well, Thorn, you spent a lot of time with me. I really appreciate. I hope we could do this again as well. Maybe as we get closer to Battle Action and Catwoman actually coming out, that way we could be a little bit more free to talk about some of the details. Obviously, we don't want to spoil anything for those fans that are waiting, but it'd be amazing to have you back if you're up to it. I had a blast talking with you. I think you're amazing, and I think
I
I'm still Red Sonja painting. I would
Oh
love
yeah.
to see you do something with that. That'd be amazing.
Like there is one down, like there will be a painting, but yeah, I'll come back. I have some things that I can't talk about, but I think that people will be very excited to hear about when we get there. So when
Okay.
it's announced, I would love to come back and just talk about,
Yeah.
comics, the thing that I want to talk about, but I don't have anyone to talk to about it. I don't know.
We
More
always have
comics get the movie.
a you have a home here. We would love to talk comics with you anytime you're up for it. And I really appreciate you too. I know we went back and forth to try and find a time, so I appreciate your flexibility. And I had a blast talking with you, and I hope you had fun too.
Oh, this was lovely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate you very much, Thorn. I do think, even though in Norway it's just a normal old lady name, in the US, your name is like the most badass name. I wish I had a name that was as cool as yours. I would literally have a hat that just said it and I would wear it everywhere. I am
I'm
Thorin,
I am
the
okay.
son of Thor.
This is the story I always tell Americans when about my name, because I try to, usually when people are like, how do you say it? What's your name? What's going on? I go, the god Thor? And
Yeah.
people be like, at Comic Cons, I'd be like, yeah, sure, Thor. And I'll go, Thor, and they're like, okay, sure. And I try that on the Amtrak thing that I mentioned, because they just place you with random people during dinners. So I
Uh,
got they placed me with an old American man, and he was like, what's your name? What's your name? I don't get it. So I went, do you know the god Thor? And he smashed his fist in the table and went, there's only one God. And I was like,
oh.
oh, fuck yes, America. I fucking love you. This is going to be great.
Yep.
And it was great.
I love it too.
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. We're a little opinionated and we really think we are the best at everything.
Yes,
And
you are.
that's probably because we haven't traveled very much to see the rest of the world because our country's so big. But a little bit of American arrogance. So hopefully that's okay. But
I love
yeah.
it.
Well, I hope that you do get to the US soon, and I hope it's WonderCon in the February timeframe, since San Diego is the best time in Norway for you to stay home, because I would love to meet you in person. And obviously, I have a shitload of stuff I would love for you to sign as a fan.
Anytime.
Yeah, I appreciate it. But Thorn, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and until next time, we'll talk soon. Okay.
Thank you. Lovely. Thank you for having me. It was lovely.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.